Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, depending on where you are on this fast forward planet, which is wrapped in a surreal number of layers of turbulent change, ranging from geopolitical to American political to, well, I'm not going to waste time on the list. There's so much going on. And it's great to stop briefly to visit with Cory Doctorow, who was on this the last time you were on a couple of years ago. Was it even maybe you would come out with a novel?
Mm-hmm.
I kind of prefer when you write about you're fictionalizing because it distances us a little bit from the stuff around us. But here we
Well,
are.
luckily I do both.
No, I know.
And rather a lot of both. So you never
There
have to
you go.
choose. You can always get both of them.
Yeah, and here you are now with a book that has enshrined your enshittification concept in hardcover, and I guess softcover will come, and digital is already on your website, craphound.org.
.com.
No, sorry, yes, .com. Little details matter. So I mean, a big chunk of the book is about arguing for what this is and why it's happening, and then there's the part about unshitifying, and we're going to get into both.
Disenshittifying.
Oh, is that better? I guess that's better.
That is the official, that is canonical.
Oh, is it? Okay, disenshittification.
Yep.
Is the thing we theoretically can all take part in to a certain extent, although some of this I'll explore. Some of this is at the high level of things like regulations and what Europe needs to do, can do that, and then some of it's what you can do with your own devices and your own habits. So first of all, just thank you for coming on. How
My
are you
pleasure.
doing? You're in the middle of a book tour.
Mm-hmm.
Where are you headed?
Miami next. So it's a 31 city tour. And so it's Miami. And then I'm back here in Burbank where I reach you today for the Burbank Book Festival. And then I'm off to Web Summit in Lisbon. And I'm going to be doing events in Oxford and in London and in Cardiff.
Wow.
And then San Diego, Seattle, Hamburg. Just had confirmation that I'm going to be giving a talk at the Chaos Communications Congress in Hamburg over Christmas week. And then I'll be in Denver at the Tatter Cover in early January. And then that's the end of this tour. My next book's out in June, so I'll be back out again over the summer.
Is that back into fiction or?
No, it's a book about the material basis for the AI bubble,
Right.
why it's going to pop, how to deflate it quickly, what policy prescriptions we should have to deal with the problems that AI presents, which are not about automation taking jobs, but about bosses using ineffective automation as a pretext for eroding wages, and what we can do after the bubble breaks, and what we can do with the useful parts of AI tooling after the bubble breaks.
I've been planning to have Brian Merchant on. Maybe you can get you both on to talk about.
I'm talking to him today at 4 p.m.
Well, tell him. Reiterate that we've been figuring out a date. And stuff.
I think a lot about Brian. I think very highly of Brian, and I cite him in the book. So
great, blood in the machine.
Yeah.
Well, we'll talk about that when we have him on the show with you. So now a very quick origin story for the idea. You know, you and I, you more so, but I came of age in that surge of enthusiasm about this thing called the social web. My .earth blog at the New York Times from 2007 through 2016. The first half of that through at least 2013, I was kind of gung ho.
Mm-hmm.
And then I felt all these things changing. And you sort of put a date on it. But just describe, do you have your own sense of when, first of all, were you an internet enthusiast, or were you always kind of going, ugh? And then when was your slide into shit?
Well, look, I am an internet enthusiast. I mean, I wouldn't fight so hard about this stuff if I didn't think the internet mattered, and if I didn't think it was great, and if I didn't think it was important. So, you know, I remain an internet enthusiast. I have always been an internet enthusiast. I can't imagine not being an internet enthusiast. The reason I want a better internet is because I think the internet's very important. And I think that so I couldn't tell you exactly when. I mean, I remember being very profoundly affected by Lena Khan's third year law review paper, Amazon's Antitrust Paradox, which from memory was 2017. But also, that was the year, if I'm not mistaken, that we lost a really important fight at the World Wide Web Consortium, in which tech monopolists and entertainment monopolists suborned the W3C, which is this very important standards body for deciding how browsers work, into weaponizing browsers and turning them into tools that could be used to attack their users with impunity in the name of protecting video from being pirated from Netflix. The organization, I think, I know was deeply divided over this, but ultimately I think felt like they couldn't buck what the tech monopolists wanted, that they felt like the tech monopolists now had a viable alternative to the web in apps, and that apps were proprietary and had no hope of being made non-proprietary, that once functionality disappeared into an app, it became the property of a company and not a protocol that other people could participate in. And they used that threat of particularly taking video and shoving it into apps and taking it off the web, but I think broadly of doing that with the whole world of things we do on the internet. If the W3C didn't take a posture that was favorable to these tech monopolists and ran counter to the public interest. And that was a huge blow for me. I still, it feels like I'm punched in the stomach when I think about it. It was a terrible day.
Were the implications fully apparent at that time, or do you think it's kind of?
Well, we certainly warned them. You can read the Electronic Frontier Foundation. I should say I work for the Electronic Frontier Foundation. It was in that capacity that I was at the W3C. This is a digital rights nonprofit that is 35 years old. I've been there for 24 years and working on trying to ensure that our human rights survive the digital transition, and that the digital transition doesn't take away the human rights in the physical world as well. I was very, if you read the letter that we wrote from on behalf of EFF when we resigned from the World Wide Web Consortium over real procedural shenanigans, and it's very funny because I've done so much of this policy work where you're, physically in a meeting somewhere, and it's ridiculous what the other side gets up to. When I was a delegate at the World Intellectual Property Organization, arguing about something called the Broadcasting Treaty that would have basically banned general purpose computers as we understand them. We had written these position papers, and we'd gotten various organizations, indie media, to help us translate them overnight into 5 or 6 languages. And I'd gone to a copy shop at 5 a.m. from the youth hostel that I stayed in Geneva, because the hotels are so expensive, and had it copied first thing in the morning. And then we put them out on the literature table, and they all disappeared and showed up in the toilets. Right? It's just, there was a similar thing. I wasn't there, but there's a similar thing when ISO, the International Standards Organization, was standardizing document formats. This is when Microsoft decided that it couldn't sustain keeping doc and PowerPoint and Excel files proprietary. So there's a standards meeting for this long, very brutal standards wrangle, and they literally took away some of the chairs at ISO so that the people from the Open Document Foundation, who make what was then called Open Office and now called LibreOffice, couldn't sit at the table. They literally hid the chairs, right? It's just amazing how petty the bullshit is on the other side.
And at that point, how much this relates to the reality that the world, that entities at the international scale and also here federally, just never appreciated how momentously important the internet would be to everyone. We had the airwaves being regulated because there's a finite blah blah, and they're federal property. And but has this been sort of in slow motion being taken by surprise by the momentousness of what's in front of us?
I actually think it's the opposite, if anything. Right.
Okay.
So, one of the policies that this book is very focused on is something called anti-circumvention. So this is laws that are promulgated around the world that criminalize altering how a device works, even if it's your device, and even if the way that you alter it is otherwise legal, if the manufacturer objects. And so they sell you a printer. It only takes HP ink. You install a program that lets you use third-party ink. Congress has never passed a law saying HP gets to tell you which ink you use in your printer, right? It's not illegal to put third-party ink in your printer, but modifying your printer to accept third-party ink violates Section 1201 of the Digital Millennium Copyright Act and is a felony punishable by a 5-year prison sentence and a $500,000 fine. And that also goes for hospitals that modify their Medtronic ventilators so that when they repair the ventilator, it just starts working. Whereas today, when the hospital repairs the ventilator, they have to wait as long as it takes for a Medtronic representative to come out and just like insert like a dongle that unlocks the repair and charges them $200 for it. John Deere, same thing. Farmer fixes their tractor. It won't start working until a John Deere representative comes out and types an unlock code into the keyboard, right? And it's against the law to modify your ventilator, your tractor to do this. It's not against the law to fix your own tractor, right? But like breaking the software lock is illegal. And the story, the legislative history of the Digital Millennium Copyright Act and then its lookalikes all around the world is really a story about policymakers and the industrial interest that had captured them, being quite ahead of the curve on this stuff. So after Clinton's election, he asked his vice president, Al Gore, to produce a comprehensive set of policies to demilitarize and then also commercialize the internet. Some of my leftist colleagues think of this as just commercializing or privatizing the internet, but it's really important to note this was also demilitarizing the internet. And Gore had these hearings. They called them the National Information Infrastructure hearings. But colloquially, they were the Information Superhighway hearings. And Clinton's IP czar was this white shoe lawyer who worked for big IP firms called Bruce Lehman. And Lehman went to Gore and he said, let's make it illegal to modify devices and software if the manufacturer disagrees. And Gore was like, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. Get out of my hearing room. And so Lehman went to the World Intellectual Property Organization, the place where my papers showed up in the toilet. And he convinced them to pass these two treaties that they're called the Internet Treaties, the WIPO Copyright Treaty and the WIPO Performers and Phonograms Treaty, that created an obligation on legislatures to pass laws like this, which he then got Congress to do in 1998 with the Digital Millennium Copyright Act. And in later years, on multiple occasions, Lehman went on panels to tell this story where he described it as, quote, doing an end run around Congress. So clearly, maybe Congress didn't appreciate the importance of this, but there were elements of the Clinton administration that certainly did. There were aspects of the government who understood how important this was. And they wanted to make sure it didn't happen, right? They wanted to make sure that the universal flexibility of digital tools was never used as a means for individuals, groups, civil society, consumers, organizers to seize the means of computation and transform devices so they worked for them and not for corporations. And he also wanted to preserve the absolute flexibility of corporations to unilaterally modify how the products that you bought from them used at any time before, during, and after purchase, to take away things that you might be using in ways they disfavor, even if those were legal. That's actually, in its own way, a very visionary, if dystopian vision. William Gibson sometimes says, cyberpunk was a warning, not a suggestion. It seems very clear that for Bruce Lehman, cyberpunk was a suggestion, not a warning.
Wow. I want to go back in time a little bit to when Pope, the last Pope Francis, did his encyclical on the environment. There was a line in it about social media and the social web and putting it to good use. And when I was probing into that, as I was writing about it, I found this thing that the Vatican put out in 1963, which I'm showing here. The Second Vatican Council Decree on the Means of Social Communication. This is, TV and radio and newspapers. And they said the media of social communication can contribute a great deal to human unity. If, however, men's minds and hearts are ill-disposed, if goodwill is not there, this outpouring of technology may produce an opposite effect, so that there is less understanding and more discord, and as a result, evils are multiplied. Too often, we have to watch social communications used to contradict or corrupt the fundamental values of human life.
I
This
didn't
is
know that the
19
Pope was reading Neil Postman, but it appears
this is
that he was.
1963.
Yeah.
And then in 2016, I guess it was, Pope Francis kind of reiterated some of this.
I guess this was a decade before Postman. I take it back. Maybe Postman was reading the Pope.
Was reading the Vatican. And I'd have to go back in time to, dig into why this was even on their agenda. But what does this make you feel in terms of, what are the drivers? Clearly the drivers are pecuniary, profit and power behind what you were just describing. And then I want to get into the, the current events part of this, which is more about Amazon, the platforms and stuff. But
but well, maybe I can bridge those two subjects then. So sure. I think that for example, conspiratorialism is one of the great poisonous fruits of social media, is downstream of actual conspiracies. I think that if you scratch an anti-vaxxer, you will generally find someone who's like lost a loved one to opioids, or who has been otherwise been given damned good reason neither to trust the pharmaceutical companies nor their regulators. And look, like I'm not an anti-vaxxer. I've been vaccinated so many times that I glow in the dark and get 5G in the bottom of a coal mine. But I will not fault someone who says the pharma companies will kill you for a nickel and their regulators will let them get away with it. Yeah. Right? That's not wrong, right? And I think that that what monopolies do first and best is capture their regulators and fuse with the state in order to victimize the general public to the advantage of their shareholders and executives. And that, moreover, the economic trauma of this, the trauma of living in a world in which your employment, your consumption, your education, your political organizing, your discourse, even your love life are being manipulated with the incredible fluency and speed and accuracy that digital technologies allow, where the rules can be changed every single time you log in, where nurses today, for example, no longer get staffed through a local staffing agency, but rather through one of 4 national apps, each of which bills itself as Uber for nurses, and which are able to buy nurses' credit history from the unregulated data brokerage industry and lower the offered wage on the basis of how much credit card debt they're carrying and whether it's delinquent, and charge them a desperation premium before they show up for work and change your catheter, right? That this is the kind of thing that makes people justifiably very, very angry. And if that anger is not channeled by people with progressive politics, if the Progressive Party has been captured by billionaires, it makes them easy marks for fascists. And so, I think that, if you want to get a big picture here about what it means that corporations are not disciplined, neither by competition nor by regulation, nor by interoperable technology and new market entry, nor by a powerful workforce that has lost its power and can no longer advocate for users, and are therefore given carte blanche to abuse and exploit us, to steal our data and our money, that this is the consequence, that there is an intimate relationship between conspiratorialism, rising authoritarianism, monopoly, regulatory capture, and abuse.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Well, the one thing about your book and what you've been saying is, and what you said at the beginning about the web is too important to abandon to these forces. It's kind of easy to feel almost as powerless about what you just described as it is in terms of current American politics or climate change, or these issues, these hyper object kind of issues that are just so big. And what's great about the book is you do break it down into pieces. You're trying to kind of get behind the bigness of the problem. And I thought we'd talk about the problem a little bit more here, and then the solution. So I picked from the book some moments related to some of the things we use every day, if not every hour. And I don't want you to go into all of these, but if you could just describe a couple of anecdotes for folks about sort of the user interface part of the problem, You were just describing, the
Sure.
big forces part.
Yeah, well, let's maybe talk about Facebook and how Facebook relates to the characteristic pattern of platform decay that I identify in this Enshitification thesis, which is this three-stage process by which a platform turns into a pile of shit. And so in stage one, the platform is good to its end users, and it finds a way to lock those users in. And so Facebook, when it was luring users away from MySpace, they made this great pitch to them. They said, well, MySpace may be a thing that you really enjoy using, and you might like the people who are there. But I don't know if you know this, it's owned by an evil billionaire named Rupert Murdoch, and no one would want to use a service owned by an evil billionaire. Plus, they spy on you a lot, and Facebook won't ever spy on you. No one should be using a social media service that spies on you. And so we piled into Facebook, and we actually lock ourselves in with Facebook. They don't have to do some of the Baroque stuff that other platforms do. Google was paying Apple $20 billion a year not to enter the search market. Uber spent $31 billion of Saudi royal money to lose 41 cents on every dollar they brought in for 13 years until all the rival cab companies had gone under, and we'd had a lost decade in transit investment before they double prices and have the wages of their drivers. But for social media, we just lock ourselves in through something called collective action problems, which is just like you love your friends, but they're a pain in the ass. And if you can't agree on where you're going to go for drinks on Friday, you are never going to agree on when it's time to leave Facebook. And especially not if some of you are there because that's where the people have the same rare diseases you are hanging out, or that's where the people who you rely on as customers or your audience are, or that's how you stay in touch with the people you left behind when you emigrated, or even just that's how you organize the carpool for the Little League games for your kids. Mm-hmm. And so you get locked into Facebook. That's stage one. And stage two, Mark Zuckerberg knows that you can't leave very easily, and that you love your friends who are there. And so long as you love those friends more than you hate him, you will stick around. And so he figures he can start making you hate him a little. And so he makes things worse for you to make things better for businesses. That's stage two. And so we see advertisers being given the ability to target you with ads, despite the fact that you were never supposed to be spied on. It costs very little money. There's incredible ad targeting fidelity. And also, because Facebook are such proud artisans of surveillance advertising, they've got a whole building full of engineers that are just fighting ad fraud. And so you give $1 to Mark Zuckerberg to show an ad to a specific kind of user, and that ad is going to be shoved right in their face, and reliably so. Publishers discover that despite the fact that Facebook had promised that they would only show users the things they'd asked to see, that Facebook will in fact take the excerpts from your own website with a link back to that website and just cram it in the eyeballs of people who never asked to see it, and that some of those users will click on it and be a free traffic funnel. They might subscribe to your feed so you don't have to worry about getting recommended next time. It becomes a very valuable tool as well. And they all get locked in too. And I think that if you're not involved in running a small business, or if you're not an economist, you may not really appreciate how easy it is for a supplier to get locked into a buyer. We all know about monopolies, which is powerful sellers. We all played that board game with our family until we wanted to kill them and ourselves at the cottage on a rainy day. But no one ever played a board game called monopsony. And monopsony is the problem of a powerful buyer. And if you can imagine a coffee shop on a block, where the office building next door is 20% of their gross receipts, and that coffee shop loses the office building next door, they go bankrupt. The coffee shop would probably go bankrupt too. You lose 20% of your gross receipts overnight. You're going to have to lay people off. You're going to need some rent relief from your landlord. You're going to need bridge loans so you can cover the interest on the loans you took out for your espresso machines. You probably can't make all that work. So just by capturing 20% of a business, a buyer can actually represent something like 100% control over the destiny of that business. And so Facebook now controls the publishers and the advertisers. And that brings us to stage three, where they drain off value from them as well, right? This is not about if you're not paying for the product, you're the product. Even if you pay for the product, you're the product, if the company can get away with it. And in this case, advertisers see the prices go up, ad targeting fidelity goes down, ad fraud explodes. When Procter & Gamble zeroed out their $200 million a year surveillance ad budget in 2017, they saw a 0% drop in sales because all those ads were just disappearing down the fraud hole. Publishers have to put longer and longer excerpts. Eventually, it has to be the whole article and no link back to your website, or Facebook won't show it to anyone. So now you're just a commodity backend supplier whose Facebook feed is fully substitutive of your website, and your only monetization path is that corrupt ad market. And then, users, we see amount of stuff we've asked to be shown in our feed dwindled to like a homeopathic residue, and the void is filled with things that people are paying to shove there, but they're getting ripped off to the tune of billions. And that's the final stage, right? The platform's a pile of shit. And the problem with that equilibrium from Facebook's perspective is that it's very brittle. It's very easy to tip over from, I hate this place, but I can't seem to stop coming here, and I hate this place, and I'm never coming back. And when that happens because of like a live stream mass shooting or a Cambridge Analytica scandal, users leave, and Facebook panics, and being tech bros, they call it pivoting. And so you have Mark Zuckerberg, arising from his sarcophagus one morning and saying, "Hearken to me, brothers and sisters, for I've had a vision. I know I told you that the future would consist of arguing with your most racist uncle using the primitive text interface that I created in my Harvard dorm room so I could non-consensually rate the fuckability of my fellow undergraduates. But actually, the future is going to be one in which I transform you and everyone you love into a legless, sexless, low-polygon, heavily surreal cartoon character so that I can imprison you in a virtual world I stole from a 25-year-old cyberpunk novel that I call the Metaverse." And that is really like end stage enshittification.
Yeah. Wow. And that's just the Facebook story.
Yeah.
You have the Twitter. Twitter, you can see the same dynamic, obviously.
Yeah.
Yet you and I are still there, and many others. And I still find the other options completely insufficient.
We love each other more than we hate Elon Musk.
Yeah, well, there you go. That's
it. He's just weaponized our solidarity and our love and our mutual dependence.
Wow. So, here's a comment coming in that you'll find amusing, I think. John.
Hi, John.
Says, "I don't have a question, but I'm ready for Cory to design a game called Monopsony."
I'm not a board game designer, but someone should design a game called Monopsony. That would be very funny. And then we could have a sequel called Oligopsony, which is when you have a cartel of powerful buyers. That would be a very fun game.
Is there any one of the other, by the way, twiddling, I was new to when I read your book.
Yeah. So twiddling is this idea that you can change the rules of the platform from moment to moment and user to user. And so, when a nurse gets offered a lower wage based on the real-time lookup of their credit history, it's not like a new idea that desperate workers will accept a lower wage, right? But the mean coal bosses of Tennessee Ernie Ford songs just like couldn't practically hire enough Pinkertons to follow the coal miners around and figure out which ones were most desperate. And even if they could, they couldn't have hired enough guys in green eye shades to change their pay packet 10 times a second. And so you get this new dynamic that is moving out of the digital world and into the physical world. So, you have things like e-ink tags in our grocery stores, which means that like Walmart could now conceivably double the price of umbrellas the minute it starts raining outside the store. They don't need an army of kids on rollerblades to go around with pricing guns. They just move a slider. And, that kind of personalized pricing, surveillance pricing, is coming to everything, as are personalized rankings, right? So you're being shown a search result or a ranking based not on what the firm estimates the best result is for you, but what they think the best result is for them. So they're pushing products from moment to moment based on who's paying the highest commission. They're showing you flights or options based on what they think they can get you to click okay on, because they can sense that you're in a hurry. There's an Uber boss who claimed on a panel that they charged more when your battery was low. They charged more for rides. And then later on, he was like, no, that was just a hypothetical of something we could do. I don't know. I don't know if that's what they're doing. I do know that what they're doing is they've got lots of ways that they calculate how desperate you are, and they raise the price based on that, and that they don't pass that on to the drivers. The drivers are also getting paid as little as they can based on how desperate they are, something that Vina Dubal calls algorithmic wage discrimination.
Wow. Ouch. This is all a major frustration you're laying out. So the book has, I think the solution side has what I would call high level points, what Europe can do, et cetera. And then what we can do as individuals. Maybe we'll go through the high level. So Europe has always felt like they have particular potential power in all of this, in many of these different, is that true, or am I just?
Yeah, I have,
am I just hopeful?
Well, so look, I don't think that Europe is incorruptible. I was the European director of the Electronic Frontier Foundation for years. I can tell you firsthand that Europe is as corruptible as anywhere else. I do think that the political economy of Europe reigning in big tech companies is more favorable than the American government doing so, just because the big tech companies are called Meta and Google and not Olivetti and Deutsche Telekom. Despite the fact that Meta used to pay their representatives like Nick Clegg millions a year to try and convince European policymakers that Meta was a European company defending them from Chinese communism, no one really took that seriously. Everyone understands that they're American companies. And Europe is a territory of 500 million affluent consumers. And so it's a very hard territory for firms to ignore. That doesn't mean that it's a slam dunk. It's also a federation, right? So federalism, as we are seeing in America today, has many advantages and many disadvantages. And one of the disadvantages is what you might call the race to the bottom, or the Delaware problem, which is that if you have a place that's a tax haven, everyone will show up there. And then if they are a tax haven, they're going to be worried about all those people leaving, because any company that can pretend that it's a Delaware company today could pretend that it's a Nevada company tomorrow. And so then they become crime havens. Then they don't enforce other kinds of laws, and their courts become very favorable to the corporations that are headquartered there against the interests of the workers and the customers and the suppliers that they steal from and cheat. And in Europe, they don't have a Delaware problem, they have an Ireland problem, but it's the same problem. All the big American tech companies pretend that they're Irish so that their money can float in a state of untaxable grace over the Irish Sea, except for Amazon, which pretends that it's from Luxembourg, which is, a fly-speck kingdom, or duchy, I believe. I think it's a grand duchy, technically speaking. But there are some very favorable conditions for Europe actually changing things, and that favor comes from Donald Trump, strangely enough. So when I was the European director of EFF, I worked in 30 countries, more than 30 countries. And everywhere I went, I would meet with policymakers and we'd talk about what kinds of policies would be good for their digital nervous system, their businesses, their people. How, for example, making it legal to reverse engineer and modify things would let them make them more locally appropriate and help them escape from the data and monetary extraction of American tech platforms. And they would listen and they go, you make an excellent case, and all of that is doubtless correct. But the U.S. Trade Representative has made it very clear that if we don't keep it illegal to reverse engineer and modify the products that we get from America, they will hit us with tariffs. So, happy Liberation Day, right? If someone threatens you with burning your house down, unless you do as they say, and then they burn your house down, you don't have to keep doing what they say. And you're kind of a sucker if you do. And what's more urgent about this is that Trump has made it very clear that the U.S. no longer has allies or trading partners. It has rivals, and that rivalry will be pursued through American tech companies. So when the chief prosecutor of the International Criminal Court swore out an arrest warrant for genocide against Benjamin Netanyahu, Trump denounced this, and Microsoft obliged Trump by disconnecting the chief prosecutor's Outlook account, which cost him all of the working files of the International Criminal Court, as well as his email, his address book, and his calendar. And I think that every European policymaker is today asking how soon they can get out of America's cloud, just as a few years ago, they started asking themselves how soon they could stop being dependent on Russian gas and oil. And the European transition to zero carbon energy sources, primarily solar, is about 15 years ahead of where it would have been without Putin. And I think we're about to see a similar acceleration of European independence from American internet technology. I think we're about to see the first real move to a post-American internet. And to do that, they're going to have to do more than what they're doing now, which is something called the Euro Stack, which is where they're building European equivalents that are open source, self-hosted, and sovereign versions of Outlook and Office 365 and Google Docs and so on. They're going to have a way to move the data over. Right? No one's going to manually copy and paste 1 million documents out of a government ministry's Outlook repository and into a Eurostack equivalent. And to do that, they're going to have to legalize jailbreaking. They're going to have to legalize reverse engineering. And once they do that, right? Then we're going to have export markets for those tools. We're going to have
That's
European companies making the tools that let you fix a car, a ventilator, a tractor, your app store, your game store, and also get your data out of any American silo. And the first country or bloc that does that reaps the advantage of selling those products to everyone in the world, and everyone else gets the benefit of buying those products. But it's much better to get an industrial boost than it is to merely get a consumer surplus. And so if it's not Europe that does it first, it might be Canada. And if it's not Canada, it might be Ghana or Nigeria or some other country, because there are lots of places where they could do this.
That's so interesting. I was just showing the Medium, a piece
Yeah.
you have on Medium that
Yeah.
I'll include in my post-show piece
So
on
it's
Substack.
also on my newsletter on pluralistic.net. So it's mirrored to Medium, but if you want one that you don't need an account to read and that there's no surveillance,
Yes.
pluralistic.net has it there.
I'll be showing that that website at the end.
Yeah.
And that was another question that came in from Tim Wacker. He said, this is two parts. So how much of all commerce in capitalist nations would you say is, to one degree or another, enshittified? Said another way, how much of capitalist, actually,
I think I can finish it in my head. I can finish. How much of this is just capitalism? There is a chapter about this towards the end of the book. Is this just capitalism? Yeah. So first of all, I think that there are distinct factors that relate to technology that make its enshittification different. So if we want to talk about enshittification, it's just like broadly things getting worse. I'm actually okay with you using enshittification in that way. I don't want to maintain a precise technical meaning for enshittification by confining its use to a group of irrelevant insiders. You know, by all means, use it loosely and colloquially. That's fine with me. I don't mind. But it does have a precise technical meaning, and it relates to digital technology. And the reason that digital technology is different is that the sources of discipline, the ways that digital technology was punished for going bad, are different from the ways that you punish other firms. So like other firms, digital technology firms are subject to the discipline of markets and competition and governments and regulation. But unlike those other firms, digital technology, when it enshittifies, has to contend with two unique sources of discipline, two threats to the firm that goes bad. The first of those is its own workforce, because the tech workforce is uniquely constituted historically. It's been very powerful, but it hasn't been unionized. The power of the tech workforce came from its scarcity and its productivity. The National Bureau of Economic Research estimated that the average Silicon Valley worker added $1 million a year to their boss's bottom line. That's why they treated those tech workers so well, right? The free kombucha and the massages and the surgeon who'll freeze your eggs so you can work through your fertile years. It's not because they were sentimental about tech workers and liked them. It's because they didn't want $1 million to walk out the door, and there weren't enough of them. The problem is that if you don't use your power from scarcity to consolidate that power through solidarity by forming unions, if you let the fact that your boss treats you so well lull you into thinking that you are a temporarily embarrassed entrepreneur and not a worker, then when supply catches up with demand, as it has in the last 3 years, where we've seen 500,000 tech layoffs in the US alone, then all of your power goes away. And then there was this other source of power, this other source of discipline on tech companies, which was interoperability, the power of rival firms to modify your technology to disenshittify it, right? So to take the proprietary ink that you're charging $10,000 a gallon for and saying, oh, I'll have some of that market. Here's generic ink and the software that makes your printer accept it for $5 a gallon, right? As Jeff Bezos told the publishers, your margin is my opportunity. There were so many of those digital opportunities, and they are sui generis to digital technology, as is the ability to twiddle, which is the corollary of this flexibility, of this disenshittifying interoperability. Because twiddling is just changing how the technology works unilaterally on the part of the manufacturer, as opposed to on the part of its customers or its competitors. And so with the expansion of IP law, we end up with a regime in which the firms have absolute carte blanche to change how their technology works from moment to moment and second to second in ways that abuse you and exploit you. And you have no latitude at all to alter how the things that you own work so that they work for you and not for the company that made them. And so in that regard, digital technology and its enshittification are different. And I think that as the second part of the question, is this just capitalism?
Yeah.
I think, we have to be historic, and we have to have a little object permanence here, and recognize that the platforms used to be better, right? It wasn't that we were like lulled into thinking that Google search results were good when they were bad. Google search results were good and then they got bad. Facebook was a great place to hang out and then it sucked. And it's not because different people are running the companies, and it's not because they got a mind virus that made them greedy. We didn't invent greed in the middle of the last decade. It's because they escaped from all sources of discipline. And, even the best of us, and these people are far from the best of us, even the best of us without discipline have a tendency to crawl up our own ass and die, right?
Mm-hmm.
Howard Hughes, give him a little discipline, he'll make you some great airplanes. Take away the discipline, he'll start wearing Kleenex boxes on his feet and saving his urine in jars, right? That's just how it goes. We have all been there, where we got too big for our britches, no one could tell us no, and we got ourselves into a lot of trouble. Robert Heinlein got able to tell his editors to go to hell. His books got big, floppy, and stupid, right? This is just a universal. And we take the discipline away from tech bosses, and every bad impulse they have, and every bad impulse from a faction within their firms carries the day.
Does that, by the way, the discipline there is that ultimately what was in that last, well, the EU, et cetera?
It's competition, it's regulation, it's interoperability, and it's workers. Yeah. It's all of those things.
Do you see the workers here having any real power, though, in the sense that there's already the AI, your next book?
Right. So I don't think AI can write software, or at least it can't do software engineering. AI can write blobs of code. Software engineering is all about having a wide and broad context window. Software engineering is about thinking about the inputs that come far upstream and the outputs that will come far downstream, and the adjacent technologies that are generating those inputs and processing those outputs. And the one thing that AI absolutely cannot do, and that no AI boss has a plan for making it do, is operating with a wider and deeper context window. So increasing the context of AI, making it think further back or further ahead, and think I use in quote marks here, or contemplate things that are adjacent to the reasoning, and I use reasoning in quote marks here, that it's doing. That work is like geometrically more expensive than just processing code. So I think the thing that we should understand, the way we should understand AI as a threat to coders, is not that it can write code, but that it can plausibly threaten coders so that they'll accept a lower wage and less power.
Right.
And that's been the use of automation forever. That's what automation does. Your boss hates you and doesn't want to pay you, and they love any story that makes you afraid he'll fire you. And so, AI lets bosses terrorize workers, but not because it can do your job, but because, if you understand your boss's psyche, you can easily see how your boss would fire you and replace you with an AI that can't do your job.
Yeah. Is looking at the regulation component here and antitrust, is there any aspect of the ultimate undisciplined boss, Donald Trump, that aligns with taming these folks, or is it all aligned in the opposite direction?
Trump is going to do some corruption fighting, but he'll do it in the most corrupt way. So to give you an analogy here, Xi Jinping embarked on an anti-corruption purge in 2013 that went on for some years. And they fired and in many cases imprisoned a lot of local officials. And it turns out that you can actually estimate how corrupt a local official is, because you can look at the loans and grants that the regional development banks issue and how they perform and whether they go to related parties. And you can compare like for like territories and go, oh yeah, that guy was feathering his friends' nests with public money. That guy was doing corrupt deals. He was doing influence peddling. And when you look at the people that Xi Jinping fired and imprisoned, they are all in fact corrupt, but he only targeted corrupt officials in the power base of his rivals. So he didn't target his own corrupt officials, and he left those corrupt officials, even when they were more corrupt than the corrupt officials he targeted, he left them intact. and left them to continue their corruption.
Yeah.
And you can see how, if you are going to do that kind of corrupt anti-corruption, it is to your benefit for everyone to be corrupt. If everyone is breaking the rules, then you don't even have to manufacture a pretext for punishing them. You can pull the people who you dislike and prosecute them legitimately, but for an illegitimate reason. And Donald Trump is doing this, right? His antitrust authority is targeting companies that are violating antitrust law, but only the ones he doesn't like, and only to the extent that they don't fold for him. And, that's likewise true of a lot of his other actions and prosecutions. Not all of them, the bogus libel suits obviously are just bogus, but they don't have to be, right? Trump has a target-rich environment of companies that he's going to want to bring in line, and he will have a full suite of anti-corruption tools to use, and those companies are corrupt, and so he's going to be able to use those tools against them.
Right. And just quickly on the this idea of becoming investors in the AI chip makers and the like, how does that play into this? The government.
Well, I don't think that golden share is going to do much. I mean, the most salient thing about AI is that it's a bubble, and that it's going to burst, and that when it bursts, it's going to be really bad, and that there is no avoiding it, and the bursting is on the horizon. The AI companies have laid out $700 billion in CapEx. They've committed to hundreds of billions more. If you listen to Sam Altman, it's trillions more. And they are bringing in, by their own account, right, like according to their own extremely dodgy accounting, $60 billion a year. And they're depreciating the assets in those data centers over a 5-year time scale, but those GPUs burn out in 2 to 3 years by their own account. So it's just like another form of accounting fraud. And you have these 7 companies that are like 33% of the S&P 500, and they're all losing money, and they're all like passing around the same $100 billion IOU and pretending that it's revenue. And it's not. And so like all these questions about like, well, what does it mean that Donald Trump has taken a 10% golden share in Intel? They're kind of irrelevant next to what does it mean that Intel and all of the other tech companies and all the companies with exposures to the tech companies, which is all of them, because we're all exposed to the S&P 500 movements.
Right.
What does it mean that all of them are going to be in like the most deep shit you can imagine? 2008 looks like a walk in the park by comparison, in like a not very long time. It's just not all that important. I think like whether America owns 10% of Intel, when Intel, along with every other company, is facing an existential crisis because of the AI bubble has popped.
Yeah. I'm hoping it doesn't pop before your book comes out.
Well, maybe if it pops right at the same time, it will be a good moment for it to be published. I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy, but there you go.
You're in a race with Andrew Ross Sorkin's book, 1929.
Yeah, exactly.
There's another question that came in. Justin T. Bass basically says, when do you anticipate the AI bubble?
I take to heart the advice that the market can remain irrational longer than you can remain solvent. This is Galbraith's famous maxim. So I haven't shorted anything, but I have just seen that the guy about whom the Big Short is deals, right? That was a dumb sentence. The guy the Big Short is about, the investor who shorted the CDO bubble, has just shorted the AI companies and gone public with it. So that guy maybe can time it better than I can. Just like, I don't know how you hedge against this. Like maybe you buy long poles so you can dig through the rubble for canned goods or something. Like, I don't really know what you do to hedge against this.
Here in Maine, we live on an inlet where we can dig our own clams.
Very good. Excellent. Yeah, I've always been bivalve curious.
Let me go back to the book. So the personal scale, we're getting away from the hyper object down to the object, like this object. You talk about ad blockers, and I am completely insufficiently dug in on this. And obviously it's a whole nother conversation to have beyond what we've just been talking about, a whole nother show or something. But can you just, what are the maybe two most important things that anyone
I have
can
to
do.
say, I'm super skeptical of this stuff. I like, by all means, you should choose the things that make you happy and make your life a little better. You should shop in places that people you like own or work at. That's
Right.
fine, and it's good for them and it's good for you. But it's not going to make a social change. It's not going to make a structural adjustment. You're not going
Right.
to like shop your way out of monopoly any more than you're going to, recycle your way out of the wildfires on your doorstep, right? These are systemic problems. And so what I would say is like, yes, by all means, like block ads, do this other stuff, use Mastodon instead of Twitter if that makes you happier. Shop at your local bookstore, bookshop.org instead of Amazon if that makes you happier. But like, don't agonize endlessly over it. There's a great bit in Zephyr Teachout's book, Break 'em Up, where she talks about agonizing about consumption choices and how self-defeating that is, and how if there's like a protest at the Amazon warehouse, but you don't want to use markers from Amazon to make your protest sign, and so you drive around for 2 hours looking for an artisanal family-owned stationery store and you miss the protest, Jeff Bezos wins that round. And you just don't need to think too hard about this stuff. What you need to think hard about is like finding a way to act as part of a polity, finding party politics, finding local activist groups. We had John Lipkowski on earlier. He was one of the founders of and the long-serving leader of a group called the Electronic Frontier Foundation Austin. EFF Austin is a community group that works on stuff at the state and local level. There are EFF alliance groups like EFF Austin all around America. If you go to efa.eff.org, you can find local groups that you can join. You can join up with. That's our opportunity. Open source hardware. I like my open source framework laptop. It's great. But like, I don't kid myself that it's going to make Apple a better company, right? I think that we have to enter the policy arena, and the good news is that like we are unfurling sails with a powerful tailwind behind us, because the degree to which the world is ready for an anti-corporate concentration agenda is amazing. We have seen a rise of antitrust action from regulators in America, in Canada, in Europe, in South Korea, Japan, Singapore, Australia, and also in like China, right? Because Xi Jinping does not view Chinese tech companies as an arm of the Chinese state. He sees them as a competitor to the Chinese state. And this is an incredible moment. We have not had this interest by regulators and policymakers in this before, and it's not because they have better ideas than before. It's because the ones who've had those ideas all along are getting listened to. Because, for example, when Joe Biden was doing the Unity Commission after he won the primary to get the Sanders and Warren wing of the party on board, they said that the hill that they were going to die on was breaking up corporate concentration. And so they got Rohit Chopra and Lena Khan and Jonathan Cantor and Tim Wu in the White House as avatars for that movement. And so getting involved now is pushing on an open door. It's joining the flood. It's unfurling your sail before a tailwind, and it's a very good time to get involved.
Presumably, the bubble bursting on AI will help drive more interest in the.
Well, God help us if it doesn't, because the two responses to a bubble bursting are either a surge in in changing the way the system works to prevent the bubble from emerging again by making our society more pluralistic and more accountable. But the alternative to that, if that doesn't happen, you get authoritarianism. It's either fascism, it's either FDR or Hitler. That's what you get when the bubble bursts, right? And so, like, when this bubble bursts, we're going to have to figure out whether it's FDR or Hitler next.
Wow. Wait. Well, and people can stay in touch with you and with your daily missives at Pluralistic, because you're incredibly prolific. I literally don't know how you do what you do, how you are who you are.
I write when I'm anxious.
Well, that explains it all.
Thank Donald Trump.
Ay. By the way, Dan Thaler says, "Hi, Cory. Good to see
Hi,
you
Dan.
again."
I saw
How
that.
do you know
Yes, hello.
Dan?
I
He was an
don't
old neighbor of mine
recall
in the
how we
Hudson
know each other.
Valley.
I don't recall how we know each other,
He's a
but
good
yes,
kayaker.
yeah.
Anyway, he says hi. Any last words of wisdom or questions that I need to address? What do I need to be focusing on for the obviously AI bubble next? But
Yeah. Well, I would say, EFF, we have this new campaign, Take Back Control, CTRL. And if you go to EFF.org, you can learn more about that. We were the first organization to sue Elon Musk and the federal government on behalf of federal workers for violating the Privacy Act. And you can stay on top of what's going on with our lawsuit there. So, yeah.
well, and Tim Wacker says he's selling his Dell
Selling his
computer.
Dell. There you go. All right.
There you go. One little flash of hope in the darkness.
Sure.
Well, I'll tell you, it's been great to catch up with you again. And this, I'm just going to go back to history one more time because this is hard for me. It's really hard for me because I was so enthralled with the upside. There was the idea of noosphere, which Teilhard and others had pursued, and I kept talking about the noosphere. I was tweeting about that, using that as a hashtag.
Homesteading the noosphere. Yeah.
And then all this shit, and I was even Darwin in 1871. In his other book, he said, as man advances in civilization, the only thing impeding a true global society is there's an artificial barrier to prevent his sympathies extending to all men. And I'm thinking, wow, we've transcended that barrier. Here we are, we got it all. And back to you. And
well, look, you never know what's coming next. You never know whether the reason that the forces of reaction are acting with such overwhelming force is because they're strong or because they're weak and they can't afford to show weakness. In the run up to October 1917, the Tsar put down all of these peasant rebellions with these overwhelming shows of force, just like hundreds of Cossacks and soldiers going to put down these rebellions in the most remote and benighted corners of the empire. And the Mensheviks, the revolutionary leaders, they thought that this meant that it was the wrong time for a revolution because the Tsar was obviously so strong that he could commit all of this power to these otherwise meaningless uprisings on the imperial periphery. But it turned out that it was because the Tsar was afraid of a spark kindling into a fire that he committed so much resource because he had so little power. And when the moment came, the army turned on the Tsar. The Cossacks turned on the Tsar. You had Cossack sergeants or sergeants who were overseeing Cossack cavalry, ordering like fixed bayonet charges against protesters, against demonstrators, and just refusing, or being told to form a line of on horseback to prevent the protest from moving to the palace. And they formed a line, and then they let the protesters crawl between the horses' legs. This literally happened in 1917. And the Cossacks were like, well, we're holding the line. That's what you told us to do.
Wow.
Right? So you never know whether the conditions are favorable or unfavorable for a profound change.
Yeah. Well, why don't we mark the calendar and find a time to talk about that with Brian Merchant
Sure.
down the line. And
that'd be great.
Thanks again for being who you are and for coming on to Sustain What, and we'll keep at it.
It was great talking with you.
And have a good journey to Miami.
All right. Well, thank you.
We're already in winter mode here in down east. Take care.
Yeah. All right. Thanks.
Bye. So for everyone watching, this could be shared right away when you're done. Just share the link you're on. That was Cory Doctorow and talking about Enshittification, his new book. He has another one coming out on the AI bubble in the spring, or I think late spring. And please get in touch with your questions going forward. Oh, I think I missed one from Kevin Welch. I'll convey your congratulations to Cory. He already popped out, and thank you for Kevin for getting in touch. Next time I'm in Austin, I will look that up. And I should do a show basically on the EFF regional hubs and how to work to advance these ideas. And also thanks to Evan Schulman for gratitude for the conversation. If you want to support what I'm doing, just go to revkin.substack.com, and there's a way to keep this all going. I do this mainly for my own edification and trying to spread the gospel of sane approaches to the human journey. Thanks again for watching, and do weigh in. And that scrolling bar at the bottom gives you all the information you need. Take care, everybody.